Hello and welcome. A very happy International Women's Day, and welcome to the British Chamber's International Women's Day 2021, the virtual conference, and today's webinar following the official theme of Choose to Challenge. My name is David Kelly and I'm the Executive Director here at the British Chamber. For the second year running, the Chamber is holding its annual International Women's Day celebration virtually. And whilst COVID has changed many things, important discussions around gender equality continue. And for the second year, we bring you a very special four-part series of this conference addressing important topics such as women in STEM, challenging bias, and diversity in startups. We began the conference last week with a formidable panel of leaders across some key STEM industries discussing the challenges faced regarding diversity, retention, and the growth of females, and what can still be done to change and challenge perceptions in the STEM environment. Later this week, on Wednesday, tune into the Chamber's podcast channel, which we launched last year, to hear the latest episode featuring female entrepreneur Helen Maguire, who's the co-founder of Diversely, together with Jingjin Liu, CEO and founder of Zazazu, who is also an INSEAD mentor to startup businesses in Singapore, and Rachel Lim, founder of Love at Benito, as they talk about their career journeys as female startups. Finally, closing the conference on Thursday later this week, join us as the British High Commissioner to Singapore, Her Excellency Cara Owen, sits down in conversation with Jenny Campbell, founder of Your Cash and former panellist on the acclaimed BBC show Dragon's Den. Jenny was previously awarded Businesswoman of the Year, and she stays true to her favourite business motto of live by corporate standards, but breathe like an entrepreneur. So another session to look forward to. So please do join us and post your questions live to Jenny. So back to today and the session on Choose to Challenge with the hashtag Choose to Challenge. This fantastic conference, and certainly today's session, would not be possible without the support of both our Women in Business Committee, who were extremely hard to bring you this content and help pull this agenda together, but also with the support of Barclays Bank, who are our diversity and inclusion partners, who support all activity that we deliver in this space. I would just like to quickly introduce you to Angel Chung, Head of Southeast Asia Coverage at Barclays, to say a few words. Angel, a huge thank you to you at Barclays, and over to you.
Thank you, David, and welcome everyone. Hi, I'm Angel Chung, and I lead the Southeast Asia client coverage portfolio for Barclays Bank in Singapore. I'm delighted to welcome you to BritCham Singapore's International Women's Day 2021 virtual conference, hashtag Choose to Challenge, conducted in partnership with Barclays Bank. Barclays is very proud to be the official diversity and inclusion partner with BritCham. And in fact, we've worked with BritCham for a number of years now, including the chairmanship of a few of the BritCham's committees, including Women in Business Committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Barclays is a strong supporter of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. As an organization, we remain focused in increasing the diversity of our employees and are committed to strengthening our supportive and inclusive culture. In order to truly create an inclusive culture, we need to ensure that we collectively challenge biases and stereotypes. This year's theme for International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. And for Barclays, this means opening an honest dialogue around stereotypes and gender biases and how we challenge these on a day-to-day basis. We also want to actively recognize and celebrate the achievements and successes of all women from all backgrounds. And with that, I will pass it back to David. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you so much indeed, Angel. And once again, a big warm thank you to Barclays Bank for all of your support. I would also like just to say a quick thank you to Julius Baer as well, who are acting as supporting partners of our International Women's Day conference. So thank you to both organisations for your kind support. As we go through today's presentation, please use the Q&A facility on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Our panel will address as many of your questions as possible following their presentations. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce to you our moderator for today, Lewis Garrard, partner and career business leader in Mercer's people science consulting practice across the growth markets region. Within his role, Lewis applies his training in organizational psychology and experience in the development of data-driven talent, engagement and employee performance programs to help business leaders and HR executives design people practices that improve organizational performance. So Lewis, really looking forward to this session. Thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks, David, and very warm welcome to everybody this afternoon. We're really excited to be here. And, you know, I'm just privileged to be joined by a really, really fantastic panel of speakers. I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're able to have today. I think we'll be able to learn a lot. So it's a great pleasure to be back. I mean, this is my third time at this event. I remember the days when we did it in person, and it's wonderful to be able to come here virtually and really invite people from all over the world to be able to join us. And today, I think what you're going to hear from the panel is a slightly more pragmatic lens on the topic of gender diversity and equality. You know, I'm a big fan of history, and one of the things that I think is really noteworthy and important is just how much transformation we've seen in the last 100, 120 years. For most of documented human history, you know, gender inequality was almost a fact of life. But over the last 100 years or so, we've really seen women come to the table and a huge range of opportunities open up. And frankly, as a result of that, the quality of life generally for everybody everywhere to be improving, and I know an entirely new, for example, customer base open up. So we've really made a huge amount of progress, yet there is a lot to do. And today, I think you're going to be hearing some really inspiring stories and thoughts and ideas. So what we'll do is we'll have the beginning of this will be each of our distinguished speakers offering some thoughts, some opinions, some ideas to really choose to challenge, you know, to step up and ask us all to think about our own experiences. And then at the end, we'll have a moderated conversation and sort of take the ideas that we've heard to another level with conversation between all of the folks that we have on the phone here. Please do use the Q&A function if you're inspired during the course of the session. Just drop questions in. I will be using them as part of the moderated conversation towards the end. So with that, I'd like to invite our first speaker. So Aviva Wittenberg Cox is joining us here today, and I'll let her introduce herself. But it's a great pleasure to be joined by Aviva, somebody who really has been a leading voice in this space and that many of us admire. So I'm really excited to invite her to share a few of her thoughts and ideas here today. So Aviva, it's over to you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, and lovely to be with you. Let me see if I can share a few ideas and invitations. I love to choose to challenge, and so I will start with the title of my talk, which is how I see this whole topic off women's shoulders and on to leaders' agendas. What I find strange about the topic of gender balance generally is it's often talked about in rooms that look a lot like this. It's talked about on International Women's Day. It's very much talked about between women, led by women, about women. I congratulate you on the gender balance of your panel. That's unusual, because I completely agree that until it's a conversation that engages and involves all genders, it's going to be incredibly difficult to make change. And I think this is one of the challenges we've seen, is we haven't been extraordinarily successful in engaging men into the topic, to take it on and to lead with it. So this cartoon, a little bit of a joke, but I think how many men feel, how some of the political backlashes we're seeing around the world, the rise of populism can be in part a reaction to some of the changes on this topic. And I think it's how we frame this issue that I think requires challenging. It's very often seen as a diversity dimension. That's how you've all introduced it. And I would say it's actually not the most effective way in. And so I offer you this other frame, which I call the 4 Ws, which are the huge kind of century shifts that companies around the world are facing: web, weather, world, and women, technological change, sustainability issues, globalization and its discontents, and the massive arrival of women into labor forces, talent pools, political bases, has a much bigger impact than I think most people are still registering. And while we saw in the 20th century the rise of women, I think what we're experiencing a lot in the 21st century is, how do countries, companies, and yes, couples at home, how do they adapt? Do they adapt, or do they react to these changing situations and the rise of women in the last century? And I'd say it's a mixed bag, right? What we're seeing and learning, particularly through this COVID crisis, is that some countries and some companies are really pulling ahead. So this article I wrote back in April went kind of viral, suggesting a little bit controversially that the countries that had best managed the crisis were those led by women. This ended up being backed up by academic data. And I suggested that what was it that made these countries outperform and these leaders deliver better results was they were very truthful. They spoke truth, very transparent. They were incredibly decisive. They acted really fast. They embraced and used technology, social media. They got very involved. And they did all that with a very particular tone of love and care for their people. Now, that's not a very female list of leadership criteria, right? I would say it's a stereotypically male list, perhaps, except for the last one, love. And I think good leaders have all of these. And I think a lot of male leaders have been watching these female leaders excel in this past year and have adopted some of their playbook, particularly in the modes of communication. And this kind of leadership was made all the more stark and noticeable because it was in contrast to some particularly toxic leadership that was at sort of the extreme other end of the gendered stereotypes, very male, very masculine, and not very effective in managing the crisis. So this whole issue of women is actually one of gender balance. And now we know from all of these different kinds of research sources, banks, consulting firms, and studies that have been carried out for the last few years, that companies that are more gender balanced in leadership outperform in their financial results. That is partly because they address broader segments. Women are now 80% of consumer buying decisions. They have a lot of power and they're leveraging it. And also because of the talent pool. 60% of university graduates globally are now women. That has a huge impact on company performance if you manage to leverage that talent. What we're really looking at, though, when we look at companies today is these kinds of what I call gender jaws. If you analyze companies' talent profiles, they look a lot like this. They start off very balanced. That's the progress we've made over the last decade or so, is that the incoming talent ratios are very gender balanced, but then the percentage of women begins to drop and the percentage of men begins to rise, almost from the very first promotion levels. So what's interesting with that kind of data is how do leaders analyze it and explain it? And I'd say that there are still a lot of myths and misconceptions in how we look and interpret what's going on inside organizations. I call this the 5 M's. You'll know I like a little alliteration here. Often it's explained as being all about motherhood. Women have children, men don't. Very interesting, because most children I know actually have 2 parents, and that women then choose to prioritize family. There's a really strong belief in organizations I work with that it's a fair meritocracy, right? And that women will make it if they lean in and struggle hard enough. I think that's not quite true, and it's proven by those gender jaws. Minimization is something I would also choose to challenge. I think the entire way we consider gender balance to be or women themselves to be a dimension of diversity, one small minority among many to be managed, is, I think, a complete misframing of the opportunity that better gender balance can bring, and minimizes the role of women and their potential impact into something much less than it should and can be. Masculinity, a lot of the corporate world, business world, still leans consciously and unconsciously towards preferring rather masculine styles. This is particularly true in the more male-dominated sectors. Finance, tech are masculinizing, I would suggest, which doesn't help their ability to gender balance. And how they often want to address the issue is through well-meaning but not necessarily highly effective policies like mentoring. Older men and women mentoring younger women. That's not going to be enough. So this cartoon, a little bit of a joke, but I think a barbed point. I can't put my finger on what it is we like about you, Miss Hardacre, but we do welcome aboard. Implies that women are still making it in the corporate world as long as they're ready to become men. And that's not going to inspire this next generation of women. So in conclusion, our suggestions are to stop fixing the women. All these well-meaning programs aimed at sort of helping the ladies along, I think, are no longer what is really required. Nor, I'd think, would I recommend the wave of more recent efforts at telling men that they are biased and that we will help unbias them. I think we need to stop fixing the women, stop blaming the men, and reframe the issue of what we call gender bilingualism, the ability to work across genders, as a 21st century management skill. And companies that are really serious about this don't actually frame it as a women's issue. They know that the 3 pillars to balancing are getting leaders aligned and ready to lead on this, adapting cultures away from their masculine norms and into being more inclusive, and adapting the whole system of organizations from talent management to customer-centric policies to make them more gender bilingual. And that takes 2 things. It takes will, which is spreading. More and more companies really do want to balance, but it also takes skill. And I think that's a lot harder to get. It takes leaders and managers who have the skill to frame this not as a nice to have pink thing led by women for women, but as an absolute business imperative led by the CEO and the executive team, and with a really strong link to business outcomes, which means going from today's manager who claims that, you know, I am gender blind, I don't care if anybody's male, female, or one of those other genders. They need to be profoundly familiar with the differences between genders and how to use them to connect with talent and customers. So we actually have a program that we've done to build management skills and get people ready for the century that's coming. Thank you very much. If you want any questions or more information about any of that, it's in a lot of publications, and I'll be very happy to engage in the Q&A.
Amazing. Aviva, thank you so much. It was, just such a great way to I think, start this. Just before we pause and then head over to Michelle for her thoughts, just a quick question to you. So I think the research on women in leadership, the COVID-19 has been one of these wonderful natural experiments, really, put everybody through this at the same time and see what happens. And I was reading some suggestion that perhaps the cultures of those countries with women in leadership positions contributed to this, was part of the process, actually, of effectively responding to COVID-19. What's your thought on that? Are these things mutually reinforcing? Is it that there's a strong female leader that's being very competent and doing well? Or is the culture in of itself, enabling the community to adapt effectively? What's your thought on that?
I've written quite a bit about that because there's so many reasons, right? It's really hard to isolate, of course, one, and different countries will have different reactions. But I would say at both country and company level, absolutely, the organizations and countries that manage to promote gender balance to the most senior levels usually are reflective of countries and organizations that are more true meritocracies, right? That are really able to promote talent of any kind, color, gender to the most senior ranks. It's both an indication of culture, it's a creator of culture, and it's a result of culture. Yeah. So hard to undo the strands, but it's still a really good indicator.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Fantastic. So with that, I'd like to now welcome our next speaker, Michelle Shi. Michelle, really excited to hear your thoughts and ideas today. I know you've got some really practical and compelling experiences to share with everybody who's been able to join us. So Michelle Shi from Dyson, over to you for your segment.
Yeah, thank you, Lewis, and thank you, Aviva, for that fascinating session before as well. I'm very happy to be here to share my own experience with everybody. I think it's interesting what Aviva mentioned about stop fixing the women. Just like Aviva had a pink mirror, I thought I would start my conversation with something fairy tale as well. Very much the Cinderella story that everybody is very well familiar with. So everyone knows how the story goes, and Cinderella, was in the situation that needed to be fixed, and then along comes the charming prince with the shoe and fix the problem. So very much this year, with the hashtag of choose to challenge, I very much choose to challenge about that lens as well, how we view gender equality and how we view females. And again, very similar to Aviva, I do not see this being a gender issue. I really see this being an opportunity. If you really think about the current world, population-wise, we already come to that balance. Female population is 49.6% of the world population. With that, and also with the share of wallet as well, females are becoming very much decision makers in our spending, as well as how we spend. So very much from that perspective, I see females very much as an opportunity. So if I were to retell this story, which Helen would very much show us what that would be, it's very much that it's not a prince trying to solve Cinderella and get her out of her problem. It's very much the prince seeing that being the opportunity, right? And I think just a bit of a tack view on this. Why glass shoe? Why only Cinderella when everybody could have a glass shoe? Every female would like a pair of shoes that's customized for them, that they don't have, their friends don't have it, and only they would have it. So why look at that as a problem to solve just for Cinderella when this is such a big business opportunity that the prince could grasp as well? So this is just a bit of fun to really get to the story I'm going to tell, which is very much about understanding the females, understanding their behavior, understanding what they actually like. Again, to what Aviva talked about before, have that gender bilingual ability. Because when that happens, there's a lot of opportunities businesses could harvest, and also females as entrepreneurs could also harvest as well. So the next slide, I really just would like to share my own personal story with everybody for that particular point. So that's way before my time at Dyson. It was back in 2009 when I actually worked in a food processing factory. Very much I was given my uniform to wear, and I was quite excited to start at this large brand food processing company. And I got my uniform, I put it on, and I just felt like something just is not right. When people talk about bad hair day, for me, when I put the uniform on, it was way worse than that. To start with, it didn't really fit. I used to joke about it. The pants, the crotch was so long, I had to pull the pants all the way up. I used to joke about to my girlfriends that I don't need to wear a bra simply because the pants went all the way up. And then the sleeves was so long, forever in the morning, it took me many minutes trying to fold the sleeves up. And it just wasn't comfortable at all. And when I look in the mirror, and not only that it wasn't fit for purpose, there's a safety hazard to it, I just didn't feel like I had any confidence in me, because what I'm wearing every single day didn't really represent me, didn't really represent how I wanted to look, how I wanted to be seen. So something as simple as a uniform, it really got to me. It really deteriorated my confidence level. And I did have a conversation also with the company to say, hey, is there any female PPE uniforms out there that I could go and buy, and I could at least have something that would fit me and make me at least feel like myself again at work. And very much, yeah, there wasn't anything out there, and done a lot of research and spoke to many other women who used to work in mining, constructions, and it seemed like everybody had that problem. The problem of the inherent safety issues with their PPEs not fitting, and also more importantly, mentally, that degrading of confidence they felt as well. So very much in 2010, a group of women under the Australian Women Engineering Committee, we started to engage with the university to design a series of uniforms that would actually be designed purposely for women. And in 2010, amongst with my great friends, Gay and Laurice, you could see in this photo, we actually opened our own company called Apto PPE, with only one goal in mind, which was very much to design purposely designed PPE for females. So we actually were the only company that actually designed a maternity range for females. And that's, again, very much linked to our story. When we started the company in 2012, I was the first one to get pregnant with my firstborn, and Gay literally followed 3 months later in revealing that she's pregnant as well. And Laurice, at the same time, also got breast cancer. So at the same time, three of us all had full-time jobs as well. So it did come across to our mind whether our passion in bringing this range to life, whether it should continue or not, with all the circumstances change in our lives. Instead of saying it's just too hard and let's just forget about it, we kept remembering how the non-fitting uniforms made us feel. So we very much decided to take the opportunity and take the personal circumstances we had and make a solution for it. And that was when the maternity range was actually born. And if you can see on the photo on the right-hand side, we've also put it in design elements where a lot of females would appreciate, such as adjusting your waistlines as you have the certain days you would like it to be loose, certain days you would like to be a bit tight. All the small elements that females have problems with. We also had a tab shirt, what we called signature shirt as well. Very much is to address the gaping issue when you wear a shirt with buttons. So they're all the elements very much that females experience every single day. And sometimes we live with it. And sometimes we think, well, everyone's been living with it. Yeah, let's just live with that. But what APTO really taught me through that experience almost 11 years ago now is very much that when you think there is a problem, it's probably is a real problem, and there are probably many other people having or experiencing the same issues. And it is definitely something that we need to find a solution for. And rather than just being unhappy and living with it, be part of the solution. I know it is daunting to start your own company, but at the same time, it's so rewarding to see something that you personally experienced to become a product, also at the same time actually benefiting a lot of other people as well. And then the other opportunity that I really think women should be doing is to actually talk about it. It is very difficult for men to understand that we don't actually feel the confidence we're supposed to feel when we wear something that is not designed for us. It is difficult for them to understand, like a simple thing like a waist adjustment could make us feel $1 million some days. They're the things we need to talk about it, and also for that gender bilingual competency, as Aviva talked about, people need to know how we are thinking, and people need to understand the needs as well. So from that perspective, not only the problems that a lot of times we just live with could be solved, it also opens up a lot of opportunity, a lot of business opportunity as well for any type of entrepreneurs, rather whether it will be man or female, to really bring products that would actually accommodate for 50% of the consumer base as well, which to me is a fantastic opportunity. It's not a problem, but it's definitely a fantastic opportunity to have as well. So going from my personal experience amongst everything else with APTO a decade ago, I'm very actually, blessed actually to be now in a company with Dyson that actually has the similar philosophy as well. So very much in Dyson, one of our value is very much to solve problems other people ignore. So when Helen gets to the next slide, you could see some of the work we've done. Not only our normal products that we very much consider the usage of all the population, but we have the James Dyson Award. This is very much to actually encourage undergraduates to actually look at the problems other people are ignoring and come with solutions to solve them. Just happened to be, it's open to everybody, but just happened to be the last 2 years, the winners are females. So you've got Juliet Giro Bennett, who's from Brazil. She actually was the winner in 2020. She designed this box, it's called the Blue Box. It's actually a breast cancer test kit. Very much rather than going through very cumbersome and painful tests for breast cancer, she wanted to not have women to feel the pain and the hesitation when they needed or wanted to check whether they have breast cancer or not. She's very much designing the blue box to make it easy for females, and so that they don't feel hesitant and then it becomes too late as well. And then on the right hand side, you've got Lucy Hughes, who's the winner from 2019, and she very much designed biodegradable plastics from nothing but fish scales. Simply because when she's looking at the waste of fish mongrels cleaning up the fish scales, she thought it must be something you can do with it, and very much linked that to biodegradable plastics as well, called marine tex, I should say. So very much, again, a fascinating example and story about people looking at problems other people might ignore. And especially in the case of Judith with the blue box, it's again looking at problems that women have been living with, so such as the difficulty of getting breast cancer screened and etc. And very much rather than living with that reality, thinking about solutions, thinking about opportunities, how to improve that. Yeah, so this is the James Dyson Award has been going since 2005. Every year we encourage all the undergraduates to get into that spirit and to find solutions to problems. And that is very much that, yeah, just to wrap up my thoughts, this International Women's Day, I really would want people, male or female, to really see the vast opportunity that we have with 50% of our population to understand the issues that they've been living with for a long time, and we've been living for a long time, trying to be part of the solution, to find ways to improve it, to solve the problems that we've been living with or ignoring. And there's so many great foundations, including James Dyson Foundation, that is actually there to support those of us that want to be part of the solution, and those of us who want to come up with solutions to grasp the female opportunity. So that's all from me today. Thank you.
Michelle, like really inspiring. And I mean, it's so interesting to hear you talk about the transition from viewing this as a problem to seeing the size and weight of the opportunity, frankly. You know, it's like, wow, there's a lot of potential customers out there. And that's something that we'll come back to, I think, in the Q&A at the end. So thank you so much. I mean, a really personal and inspiring story about, you know, seeing the opportunity and the challenge. So really amazing.
Thank you.
So our next guest is the wonderful Andrew Ashman from Barclays. And, you know, Andrew, I'm really excited to hear your perspectives, because I know you've got some personal stories to share, and, you know, looking forward to hearing your point of view. So, Andrew, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Lewis. And thank you, Aviva and Michelle, for some very fascinating presentations. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I was asked to join this panel to provide the male perspective in the interest of bringing some diversity of thought to this important discussion. And I'm really, really grateful to have the opportunity to share my thoughts on gender equality with you on this important day for women. When I was asked to speak today, I was reflecting, and I really wanted to make sure I use this opportunity to share important aspects of this issue from two angles. Firstly, from my professional life, and secondly, from a personal perspective. But taking the corporate side first, I've been at Barclays for 15 years, and in that time, I've seen a real sea change in attitudes towards gender equality and the need to improve in this area, both within Barclays and within the banking industry as a whole. And in those 15 years, we have come a long way. But I think we also recognize there's still a lot of work to do, and that the pace of change really needs to improve. So I'm really proud that Barclays is continuing to push for this improvement in ways that I'll run through shortly. Now, Barclays has always been a leader in promoting gender equality. Back in 1958, we were the first bank in the UK to appoint a female branch manager. An amazing lady called Hilda Harding, who really chose to challenge the initiative. But bringing this issue up to date, it's important we look forward and discuss what we're all doing today. Well, to drive change, we recognize we must be answerable with measurable initiatives. And this benchmarking means we strive for continual improvement. A big feature of our gender equality initiative is transparency of what we do and reporting the results that we achieve and don't achieve. We don't claim to be perfect, but we are working to be better year over year. To highlight some examples of our commitment to improving gender equality. Firstly, we're a founding member of the Hampton-Alexander Review. This is a UK government initiative designed to increase women in senior leadership positions of FTSE 350 companies. That review set a target that 33% of board and senior leadership teams should be female. Now, this doesn't seem like a high bar or challenging enough. And in fact, within Barclays, we currently stand at 33% female at the board level, but only 29% female in senior leadership positions. So there clearly is more work to do. But I do believe this transparency in both progress and our ambitions is really, really important in shifting the needle in this area. The second area of transparency is the gender pay report. And one of the most egregious examples of gender inequality is highlighted by the gender pay gap. Again, I think it's important that we all face up to this issue through transparency and reporting. Now the pay gap occurs because there's an overrepresentation of men at senior levels. And so what we're doing at Barclays is we're publishing an annual gender pay gap report. We're trying to close that gap. We recognize the only way to close that gap is to have women fairly represented at all levels of the organization. So a lot of the practical initiatives that we've implemented are designed to promote women to senior leadership positions. So what are these practical initiatives? Well, in the words of Emmeline Pankhurst, deeds, not words. What are we actually doing as a bank to achieve more equal representation across all levels of our organization? Well, we've taken a more active role in helping women come back to work after a career break. This includes offering flexible working arrangements for both women and men. And I think it's important to recognize the role of male colleagues in this drive to assist with partners coming back to work. Perhaps a silver lining of the COVID pandemic is really showing the world how successful flexible working arrangements can be, with work from home allowing childcare responsibilities to be shared more equally across partners. Another practical example is increased maternity and paternity schemes, again, focusing on the male part of that scheme, recognizing the importance of the family unit for both parents in the drive for gender equality. And one of the most effective initiatives that I've seen is a scheme called the ex officio scheme, where we increase the female representation on committees and decision-making teams. Again, it brings diversity of thought and experience to those forums, leading to more successful outcomes. And so, as we take a step back, I think we always need to remember that banks, that companies are really for-profit organizations with more than just an eye on the bottom line. So why is gender equality becoming such a critical component of many companies' strategies? Well, as Aviva mentioned earlier, gender equality results in better commercial outcomes. Employees who better represent our stakeholders, in particular our customers, will bring a more balanced perspective in decision-making, in risk-taking, and ultimately will design better proposals for our clients. They'll bring better client solutions, which naturally drives commercial success and increases financial performance. So for me, workplace gender equality is not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. And so that brings me to the second area I wanted to cover, a more personal reflection on gender equality. I can see that in order to facilitate gender equality in the workplace, it's also critical to have equality and teamwork in the family unit. As a married father of three, I've seen this firsthand after my wife took an extended career break to have our children. I am pleased and I'm proud to say that my wife was able to return back to professional life as a senior lawyer in a multinational corporation. And I think part of that success of her transitioning back to work was due to us sharing childcare and other family responsibilities. We both admit it wasn't easy, but through this process, we recognized that both our careers are equally as important. And this helped us work as a team to promote success in both our professional and our family lives. And so by striving to improve gender equality in our companies and in society today, I hope that one day my two daughters will be able to achieve success in all aspects of their lives without barriers or discrimination. I'll pause there, Lewis, and look forward to questions in the session afterwards.
Yeah, it's a wonderful set of, as you say, very pragmatic and practical examples of how both the company but also you at home have, been able to adapt your life to make this really work for you. Just a quick question before we go on to Jason, who was our last speaker. So, COVID-19 as a sort of enabler of better gender balance, as Aviva had mentioned. It's been interesting because there is some concern that actually that this has impacted women much more heavily than men. They've taken a broader share of the responsibilities from, for example, homeschooling, etc. And I don't know about you, but certainly now we're going back to the office, you can see the people who are particularly ambitious back in the workspace quite quickly, and that gender balance doesn't seem to be quite working out. So what's your feeling about how we can actually use this as an opportunity? Do you think that actually this will even itself out, or do you think there are actually actions we need to take in order to make sure that digital working actually becomes the enabler of gender balance that it potentially could be?
I think that's interesting, Lewis. I think that the main point is looking at the family unit and taking that as a team across the two working parties in that family unit, and really recognizing that domestic chores, domestic responsibilities, childcare responsibilities are something that need to be shared across both partners. I think when you get to that point and you accept that that's the case, then you can implement things like working from home, and you can take advantage of that and use those initiatives to better share the responsibilities. But if you're not going to accept that you have to have an equal fit in the home, and you're going to come back to the office and everything's going back to normal, it's probably not going to work. So it really does depend on the setup.
Yeah, and it's amazing, to see companies now realizing that if you've transplanted a lot of work into home, remove those boundaries, that you need to start to view a person in a much more holistic way. There's not like work time and home time. These things are blurred together significantly for many people. And, that's I think a transition both for managers and leaders, but also people themselves. So it's, something to be worked on. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's, really fascinating to hear your stories. And now on to our last speaker for the day. Before we begin the conversation, Jason Moo from Julius Baer. Jason, I'm really excited that you can be our final speaker today, because I know you've got a really important topic about women and wealth, and I'm sure many people on this meeting are really curious about this. So Jason, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Lewis, for the introduction, and thank you again to Aviva, Michelle, and Andrew for all the really interesting topics that we discussed beforehand. And as I was joking before everybody came online, if you could pick out who is going to be the banker, you would go with the one with the least decorated background and the one in the suit. That's a typical image of a banker anyway. So I apologize, my presentation will be full of numbers, as is any good banking presentation is. But I do think, as Luz pointed out, would be a good introduction to the topic we have for you today about women and wealth. So Helen is unfortunately tasked to control the slides, as it were. But I think in line with our thesis, or the thesis this year, the tagline to choose your challenge, I think our challenge for everybody is to challenge your financial independence for women. So there's no better time than now to take that independence back or reduce the dependence on men. So there are a few reasons we kind of put that out there. One, women live longer and hence need to plan for a longer retirement, invest early and often, for longer periods to take advantage of the magic of compounding. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Two, unfortunately, as we've known and seen a lot and read a lot of articles, the gender gap in wages translates to wealth and retirement gaps that need to be actively managed and can be reduced through investing and the aforementioned compounding effect. Three, the tendency to make fewer large financial decisions in a household. This results in women potentially being less prepared for retirement or feeling pressured over their personal finances, and we need to change that power dynamic, as it were. And last, but certainly not least, women are not inferior investors. Studies suggest that despite their tendency to underestimate their financial knowledge, women as a group tend to outperform men. So in the next page, we will break down global wealth by gender. So if you look at this, in the 2019 report, the financial future is female. S&P Global estimates female control of the woman's investable wealth at $72 trillion by 2020, with women, by some estimates, as much as a third to 40% of the world's total wealth. Consultancy group BCG forecasts the woman's wealth could grow by a compounded annual growth rate of 7.2% from 2019 to 2023, so a short 4 years, outpacing the 5.2% CAGR growth rate projected for men. While women's share of regional wealth is highest in North America at 37.3%, it's growing the fastest in Asia, forecasted at 10.4% over the same period. And if you look at the number of women represented in the world's 100 richest people in the world, in 2000, that number was 4. And by 2018, that number is 10. So obviously still a woefully low number on any scale, but I do like the trajectory, and I do see the importance of women as it comes to wealth. So we look at the next page. Just in general, in coming years, we expect to see a number of societal shifts. Women would likely be solely responsible for their finances in their lifetime. They will increasingly be breadwinners or co-breadwinners in the majority of homes. According to BCG's report, Women in Wealth, Managing the Next Decade of Women Wealth, published in April last year, 70% of millennial women classified as born between 1980 and 1995 said they would take the lead in financial decisions. That's 70%, while only 40% of baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964 said the same. While this may be higher due to higher financial literacy of young women and the increased sense of empowerment, there is still no better time to start investing for all groups of women than now. So if we can go to the next page, we'll talk a little bit about the life expectancy of birth by gender. And I think everybody knows this as intuition, but here are the facts: that women live longer, and full stop. And hence need to plan for a longer retirement. Women live longer than men on average, with average life expectancy for women in Asia specifically outstripping that of men by 4.5 years. And one thing we have experienced being in the private banking industry, unfortunately, in some situations, the death of the sole breadwinner, in most cases being the men, women or their wives who take over find themselves burdened or lost when forced into having to invest when they had no education. So again, going back to no better time than now, if you don't know how to invest, is to learn how to invest and be able to do so just to prepare yourself. We can go to the next page. Have you started saving? In the survey through BlackRock, women, it's quite clear that women may not be prepared for a longer retirement. As you can see from here, 53% of women reportedly starting to save for retirement versus 65% for men. And unfortunately, data shows that women earn less than men to the wage gap we talked about earlier. Women earning 81 cents for every dollar earned by men on an uncontrolled basis. And this measures median salary for all men and women. even on a controlled basis, and if we took that meaning median salary for men and women with the same job and qualifications, women still earned less at 98 cents for every dollar earned by men. Within Asia, Korea and Japan are amongst the most biased markets, with women earning 33% and 24% respectively less than men. And if you go to the next page, even if we look at Scandinavian countries where social policies are more generous and culture more egalitarian, we find that there is still a gap between the earnings of women and men, both with families. So I think it's less governmental support or society. It's more that we, as a society, need to challenge men's relationships with childcare and women's relationship to the economic providership for the family. So in the next page, if you see how prepared are you, and the wealth, and this is solely for the US, wealth and retirement figures in the US, over time, this disparity we talked about earlier on about the gender wage gap, this disparity results in wealth and retirement gaps that are hard to close. So we need to act now on the wealth and retirement gap. So we go into kind of roles that men and women play in a family in the next page. You will see, and this comes from a more of a local study, but in a survey, we asked women to describe, both women and men, to describe their roles regarding financial responsibilities at home. And I can't say this any clearer, but women need to step up in personal finance, not just spending, not just saving, but really investing. Women were less likely to be responsible for household financial decisions. In Singapore, studies indicate that only area where women assumed sole financial control was in groceries and day-to-day purchases. 52% of women are solely responsible for this versus 32% of men. The contribution on the mother is most on how to reduce the spendings. In other words, how to save more money. And we need to challenge the notion that family wealth is what the husband earns and what the wife has not spent. Just out of a personal anecdote before we move on to the next page, I personally, I have a wife who works as well, and she earns an income, but the other responsibility she also takes on at home, which is the investing of the family assets. Just because she is significantly smarter than I am, and this is funny coming from a person who runs a private bank, but nonetheless, I think it's important as well because that also helps with the balance of with the power dynamic in a couple relationship and in a family. If the wife has equal say, if not more say, in investing family assets rather than just the savings/spending for the family. So if we can go to the next page, one other thing in terms of asset allocation by affluence level. Women in general tend to avoid uncertainty and seek more data before making an investment decision. Women in most wealth bands tend to be more risk adverse than men and likely to keep a higher percentage of assets liquid, i.e. cash. This preference of cash would mean women could miss high yielding opportunities. So the result of this is that we need women to take on more risk in investing. In other words, increase their risky assets to benefit from compounding and the growth in the capital. And given historical evidence, I think the female investors will likely be more prudent even when they go into risky assets than male investors. So at the last, one of the last few slides, we just wanted to reaffirm that women are great in investing. You just need to start now. So on an aggregate, unfortunately, based on data, women are behaviorally more risk averse. So we need to change that, as we talked about. You trade less. You're open to more advice and just less stubborn. So a couple of personal anecdotes as I will put in here is number one, remember first of all that active trading needs extensive experience, but asset allocation, which is general investing, needs common sense, and in most cases than not, are needs-based. So what I mean by needs-based the needs are based on your required for income, your requirement for growth in capital. And so the second thing I was going to talk about was the rough rule of 100. And this is kind of something that we tell our younger partners in our organization, some of the children of our clients, is the rule of 100 is 100 minus your age is how much you should invest in risky assets. So if you happen to be lucky to be 25 years old, then 100 minus 25 is 75. So 75% of your assets should be in risky assets. When you're closer to 50, like I am, then that's more balanced between risky and non-risky. So again, that is not that is just a rough rule. It's not something that is golden and you should hold to it. But it's a good thing to think about at the back of your mind. And the lastly, just from a personal perspective, get the strategy right, then look at the tools. Now there are a lot of ways to invest, ETFs, online brokerages, all this kind of stuff. But it's more important that those are just tools and vehicles to invest, but it's more important to get the strategy right first. And by the way, talking about women investing better, there are there's a lot of data that proves that fact. For example, the University of Warwick tracked investor performance for 3 years. The findings in the research paper Are Women Better Investors Than Men, published on 20th of June 2018, indicated that women outperformed men at investing by 1.8% return. Men are likely to pick more speculative stocks, while female investors had a longer term perspective that benefited over time. Another one, the University of Sydney Business School and University of New South Wales Business School studied the relationship between gender and stock trading performance using data on trades by Finnish investors from 1995 to 2011, so a much longer kind of time period. And findings published on 2016 yielded an impressive internal rate of return of 21.44% per annum by the females. And females were just better at recognizing patterns in data with superior trading intuition and prefer to purchase underpriced stocks and sell overpriced stocks based on trading signals. I've got a bunch of these, so I won't bore you with that, but there are a lot of data that continually prove that women invest better than men. So if you go to the next page. So lastly, I'll just leave this with you. Invest early and often for longer periods to take advantage of the magic of compounding. There's no better time to start investing for all ages groups of women than now. And the last quote I'll leave you with, which may or may not be true, but it's attributed to Einstein. But compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world, and it is the most powerful force in the universe. So those who understand it earn it, and those who don't pay it. So sorry, just the last page is just a summary page of what I talked about before, which is this is a case for women to start planning and investing now, and do so please, and invest in more risky assets to benefit from compounding. But that's where I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. I enjoyed that tremendously. The data is wonderful. So, I mean, we're going to go on to some Q&A now, but just to stay with you here, I just want to poke something for a minute. So,
sure.
Because I think there's a little bit of something I need to clarify. So, women are better investors. And partly I get the feeling from the data you shared because they are less volatile, frankly, than men are. So they get better return. But then, it seems that you feel that actually they should be showing a greater risk appetite than what they're currently, is in the female investor profile currently shows. What's your reaction to that? I mean, is it that that actually, basically that women should just continue doing what they're doing, or are you kind of encouraging them there to be a little bit more like men? What's your reaction to that comment?
So that's a great question, Louis. So what I'd say is that despite the general characterization that women invest in less risky assets than men, there's still an outperformance over a period of time which means that if there was a little bit of a shift, and I'm not saying women need to shift from, cash all the way into, highly speculative equities right now, but it is maybe a 5 or 10% increase in their asset allocation, that outperformance could be even larger. Because it's as I said before, women tend to digest data better, open to suggestions, open to other options. And I'm sure all of us have experienced this once before, but who hasn't come across a guy who goes like, well, this is down, I'm going to buy more just to average down, and that keeps on going. So they keep thinking good money after bad, and much more. And most of this is ego driven more than anything else. Whereas women, in my personal experience, a bit of a stereotype, so I apologize, but a little bit more logical about it. Ironically, say, well, if it's not working out, we'll just cut the loss and we'll look at something else that looks better. So again, this is, I think it's just a little bit of shift will increase that gap even more. So that's what I'm scared about.
Very good. So look, so we're gonna, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason. And now what we're gonna do is, generate a little bit of Q&A and get engaged with each other in a bit of conversation. And folks who have joined us, please do feel free to add questions into the Q&A panel, and I'll be keeping an eye on that. So the first thing that really struck me about the last hour or so is that we've learned very clearly that women are, in a crisis, certainly better leaders. They are more competent investors, at least the data suggests. They live longer and therefore potentially have better habits. Have in recent examples from Michelle, for example, have the potential to be incredibly creative and innovative and to spot problems that perhaps had been overlooked for a very long time. Kind of makes you wonder, what on earth have we been doing? So it's like, oh wait, actually, this is what have we been doing here? So, one of, I think, the important lessons here is then perhaps what we need to be asking is, how can we help men be more like women? If they're getting, if women are starting to get all of these amazing outcomes, what are important lessons from that? If this was a business conversation, you'd be looking at that performance saying, wow, there's a lot to learn there. How can we be more like that? And so I think I would really love to hear the panelists' reactions to, how can we learn, what lessons can we learn from this, all this incredible data that has been shared with us today, so that we can improve everybody's lives, and in particularly the men who have joined us today, to say, well, actually there's a lot we can do here. So Aviva, I mean, you were first to speak, and I'd like to invite you back. I'd love to hear your reactions to this. How can we help men learn from these lessons, and what do we need to do to address that audience?
I think men are learning. I think the men on our panel are good examples. I think companies are adapting. I think countries are adapting. So I think it's on its march. It's often not as fast as we would like it to be. I wrote a blog for International Women's Day in Forbes that suggests actually what we're seeing is the public sector might be picking this up faster and promoting women to the very top. If you look today at who runs the European Commission, the European Central Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, the US Secretary, and of course the US Vice President, we're starting to see women really emerge into the powerful roles in the public sector. And the private sector is lagging a bit, I would suggest, for a number of reasons that are very interesting to, because they are supposedly the results-driven, rational part of the segment, right? We like to think that they are the real movers and shakers, the disruptors of our lives. Well, this is maybe one disruption too many, right? But I think there has been an over-focus in the last, decade that this is somehow a woman's issue. And I think if we want to get men involved and leaders really engaging and learning from the data you're suggesting, is we need to make this a leadership issue and a management skill, that is measured, evaluated, and people are accountable for. And that flip, I think, has happened in a leading edge group of companies. So I'd say, there are maybe 10% of companies who are getting it and on with it and gaining competitive advantage from it. Now it's time for the rest to catch up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you're saying, we've seen sort of almost an acceleration of this. I think there's a kind of social trend almost, as you see others sort of looking at each other saying, oh, that seems to be going well, I'd like to do this. The irony, government being out ahead. I mean, Michelle, you just mentioned about working when you started your own company and now you work for a very progressive one in this space. What kind of leadership and management practices really work from your perspective? I mean, what are you seeing actually accelerating this, and what works for you?
Yeah, I think it's something all companies and all leaders should consider, whether it will be male or female, is very much to understand your customer base and mirror that, simply because by understanding your customer base, you tend to have people who can think like them, people who can look deeper into what they need in your organization to actually help you have products that actually match their needs. But also, more importantly, I think it's just good company practice to very much have that different perspective in there, whether it will be gender related or culture related, or whether it will just be geography related. I think when we sometimes talk about diversity, we tend to box diversity by the differences of how people look and everything. And for me, it has always been diversity is how people think differently. With their different background, their different experiences, they bring in that different way of thinking. So I do think that if we have leaders or companies opening up to zoom out a little bit and very much thinking about where and how they can bring that diverse way of thinking and diverse way of views into the organization, and then have the organization very much create the safe environment to allow these different types of diverse views to flourish and bring ideas onto the table, is really going to help. And I do think sometimes we're quite zoomed into what we think diversity is, and we tend to forget about the beauty of diversity is really in that different thought and different views.
Right, the cognitive diversity, is often that it's called. Yeah, very much so. So, I mean, to change track a little bit, I mean, on this topic, very often, we talked about culture a bit here today, and culture, comes with a lot of assumptions. And one of the things that often gets raised in conversations like this is the assumption that men are, grow up naturally, biologically, to be more ambitious or headstrong, show a stronger interest in being leaders, etc. So part of, the outcomes that we've had in the past are just because of male tendencies in biology. Now, it's been very interesting to see actually the data for the differences in performance. So, I mean, Andrew, you talked a bit about your family, your daughters, your hopes and ambitions for them. I mean, what's your reaction to that? How much of this do you think is nature versus nurture? And, how much of this then is something that we, need to think about from a parenting perspective?
I think there's part of it is nurture. I think maybe historically we have brought our sons up to be slightly different to our daughters. I think, me personally, I'm trying to be very equal, but I still see maybe it's a bias, an unconscious bias where you do treat certain sexes differently as the kids grow up. But I'm making a real conscious effort to make sure that I'm not doing that. An example is my daughter is a really big rugby player. She loves rugby, and been really helping her to get into rugby. I've been coaching her team to promote that that kind of diversity and a different way of thinking. So I think it's really up to parents to try and remove those unconscious biases and give your kids the opportunities across the spectrum. And also it's this choose to challenge, really drilling into daughters in particular that you can achieve what you want to achieve. You have to challenge and you have to go out there and want it.
Yeah. I mean, so we've seen in the, so for example, I do a lot of work with, HR teams, and I find that many of these teams will have leadership models, ways of teaching leaders in the organization how to be effective leaders. And almost invariably, there's a competency or some sort of behavior that's described as drives performance or something. And what I find very curious about this is it always, behaviorally then is translated into pushy and obnoxious, basically, and what I find strange about this is that, well, you could just measure who actually gets performance. And very often when you look at that data, doesn't require you to be that way at all. It's just, we've looked at the current sample of people who we have, all of who have very masculine characteristics, and then connected the two things with a very limited sample. So very often we are looking at a group of people and making assumptions about their behavior that are just not true. We just don't have enough of a breadth of different types of behavior to see what actually works. And I think some of that comes into what's happening in the workplace, where we've got so used to being one way. And Aviva, you talked a little bit about this, the masculinization of many workplaces. This is, I guess, connected to the culture piece. Do you see that improving? Because still, if you look at a lot of particularly Western economies, particularly the leaders in public sector, for example, still seem to have a lot of these characteristics, suggesting that those kinds of traits get you into more senior positions.
Yes, I refer to you perhaps to a book you'll really enjoy by Thomas Chamorro called "Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Get Promoted?" Because we all share actually strong biases on what leaders should sound like, and we value very often confidence over competence. Women do not sound the same as men very often, and they don't want to. So I think to your earlier question of should men become women, no, and women shouldn't become men, right? What we're trying to do is actually recognize that today we have a fantastic human success story in the youngest, biggest, most ambitious, most educated cohort of women the world has ever seen, which is a shared opportunity for all of us to leverage our magnificent differences for better results. And we know that companies that mix gender balanced teams outperform, gender balanced companies outperform. So I think the organizations that really adapt best are those that see that there's in the balance is the magic, right? And we shouldn't try and become each other. It's much easier, rather than men becoming women, is just recruit a few more and promote them. No sex changes required, right?
Yeah, it sounds remarkably easy when you say it that way. Just have more of them, invest a bit more time, and it'll all work out fine. This isn't that difficult. And
don't leave them all in staff and support functions so that the HR teams that you work with are overwhelmingly female and the profit and loss responsibility jobs are overwhelmingly male. That's not gender balance, right? So our suggested target is 60% maximum of any gender anywhere at any level.
Yes, exactly. This, again, back to your point, this is about balance, and that's really what we're going for. Right now, we're massively out of balance. Exactly.
Which I'd argue is actually a much better word than diversity, just to throw that controversial notion in. We're not talking about diversity. We are talking about half the human race, half the future customers in any business. and more than half the talent coming out of universities today. So that's not about diversity.
No, for sure. I mean, again, when we started this is kind of the point, which is we've kind of, if you think about the long tail of human history, it's been amazing that we've got this far, into the 1900s without inviting this 50% of people to actually come to the table and contribute the full extent of their capability. So, this is a conversation about pragmatism. It's like, well, this just makes sense right now. So, I mean, Michelle, you as somebody who's been run your own business with some partners, now working for a much larger one. I mean, what did it take for you to sort of step up and say, listen, I think there's a huge opportunity here, to feel confident to do that? When you look back on yourself, when you started that business, what was it that caused you to feel strong enough to take that leap? Because it's a huge risk and, very, it's an amazing step forward. So what was it?
I think it was, I just was fed up with it. I think when I talked about how we went out searching to see if there are products out there that could actually meet our needs, some of the answers we got from a lot of the large organizations that do make PPE is that, well, we do have smaller sizes. So do feel free to buy smaller sizes. And when you do explain to them that smaller sizes doesn't mean it is fit for purpose for females, and also does come with inherent safety risks and etc., there just doesn't seem to have a lot of people with that understanding, or even that willingness to understand. So that is one, really being fed up with nobody seems to understand the problem. And the second is really support. I think we would not have had the courage to actually open the company until we had so many females coming back expressing the same concerns. And we did have big corporations actually said to us, we would really want to partner with you and try this out. It's a new territory for everybody. I really think that support and encouragement was in the end what pushed us over the line, just to see that big companies that normally would just go for the cheapest procurement options actually are willing to spend more money to procure PPEs that are actually purposely designed for females. So I do think that support is a big thing, and that is why also today I want to about all the opportunities that the females could support each other as well, in actually having more entrepreneurs that are addressing opportunities that females would have.
Yeah, really good. And so just to link this then, because Jason, I mean, you shared a lot of data with us about how important it is that we improve, financial literacy with women. Where does that start? I mean, because the numbers you're showing there were quite stark, and just really made me thoughtful about just not just roles, but if this is going to be a significant segment of the global wealth base, how do we make sure that that women actually get a piece of that, and have the financial education they need, frankly, in order to take advantage of it?
I think it starts actually with the family, right? It starts with the parents making sure the daughters have exactly the same access to information as their sons, which I'm sure is happening now anyway. To get access to financial knowledge vis-a-vis degrees at the university, or just access to in some more kind of better, more affluent families getting access to their private bankers, such as ourselves, and being able to educate them. But besides that, there's now, I mean, versus 24 years ago when I started working, there's a ton of information out there on the web that just talks about simple basics to invest in asset allocation. But it all really starts from encouragement from the family, encouragement from mentors, encouragement from seniors, just to make sure that that women have equal access to investing as others. And I'm just going to quote my a senior woman in Julius Baer, who is Betty Sanchez, who is a member of our executive board and the head of Latin America. She said once, women do not want special treatment. They expect equal treatment. Women expect to be listened to be understood, to be informed, empowered, and empowered to make fact-based decisions. Women increasingly understand financial risks and opportunities as well as men. Nevertheless, we execute differently and tend to be more risk-averse and detailed in our approach. What we do not want is to be patronized as we seek investment advice. So, like I said, it is also incumbent upon us as private bankers to present information objectively and to make sure everybody is equally educated. But it starts with the family and starts with the service industry. So I think it's both there.
Very good. All right. So we've just got a minute or two left. I mean, I think actually that's a really good sort of final thought from you, Jason. I mean, Andrew, from your perspective, what one or two thoughts would you like to leave the audience with today?
I think males or females don't make better leaders. I think everybody's got strengths and everyone's got weaknesses, and we just got to learn to improve our weaknesses. And I also think having different views produces better solutions. So my key is having different people who represent our customers, delivering solutions for our customers produces a better outcome. So I think commercially, having better gender balance is the right outcome.
Very good, very pragmatic. Thanks, Michelle. What's your sort of final thoughts that you'd like to leave people with?
For me, is really to support the females out there. If you do see that issue or problem that you've been living with for a long time, don't ignore that. Be part of the solution, and really encourage and support the others as well. We all need that.
Thank you. And Aviva, a final thought from you?
Final thought, stop fixing the women. They're just fine. Stop blaming the men. Educate everybody in how to become gender bilingual so that we can all benefit and win from more balanced companies, businesses, and countries. We're getting there. Keep it up. Choose to challenge.
Very good. Excellent. So just one final thought for me. I enjoyed this tremendously, learning from everybody here today. I have a lot of practical experience with this because I was telling someone just this week, between myself and the global chief executive of Marsh & McLennan, there is not who is a man. So there's not a single man in my direct reporting line. So my boss, her boss, and her boss are all very, very strong, very, very capable women in leadership positions. And, I've got to tell you that I think we've made a lot of progress by changing our leadership style to be much less about how much you can say and much more about just being able to listen and understand what other people are saying and use that information to make great decisions. And I've learned a lot from the women in my career and my life about doing that. So with that, I think I'm going to hand back to David. Thank you so much for inviting the panel here today. I hope everyone got as much out of it as I did, and I'll pass it to you to close.
Thank you so much, Lewis. Well, look, first of all, thank you to our fantastic speakers for your time today, Aviva, Michelle, Andrew, Jason. I learned a hell of a lot. Really, really fantastic insights, and Lewis really fabulously chaired. Thank you so much, and thank you for posing all those questions to our panel today. Really fabulous takeaways from my perspective. I hope you online really enjoyed today. I mean, what a great way to celebrate International Women's Day with such fantastic content. So I hope you also had some thoughts sparked and enjoyed the debate and took away some key learnings from the sessions today. So the Chamber has a packed calendar of webinars coming up and podcasts around thought leadership and articles in our Orient magazine. So do get in touch with us if you would like any further information about the Chamber or interested in becoming a member. A huge thank you once again to our diversity and inclusion partners, Barclays Bank, for your continued support of the Chamber and this important agenda. And thank you also to Julius Baer as well for supporting our International Women's Day conference schedule as well. You'll receive a feedback form from Helen within the team, and please do fill this out. It gives us a great opportunity to ensure that we learn from what you like and what you find interesting and the content you find relevant. And your opinions are really important to us, and it does help us to shape the agenda and the content going forward. So your thoughts and your feedback would be much appreciated. So with that, a final thank you to our fabulous panel today. Thank you so much for your sharing. And I wish you all the very best for the evening for those of you in Singapore, and for those of you that are in a slightly more favourable time zone, have a great day ahead. Take care. Thank you, and see you next time.